Hey everyone, welcome to Ministry of Automation podcast series. In this series, you're gonna learn unconventional ways to automate UI, web services, CI/CD, DevOps, and much more. And we're gonna see a lot of industry experts around Bay Area, Bangalore, India, and around geographies who can share their experience and how they learn automation and grew in this industry. So stay tuned. You can listen to all the podcasts by visiting ministryofautomation.com/podcast automation training, by visiting my website ministryofautomation/enroll for training, and also you can listen all this podcast on LinkedIn free audio event. If any of this is useful to you, please consider commenting, give me a feedback, and let me know how it's going. So let's get started. Welcome to the Ministry of Automation podcast series. In this episode 1, we're going to talk about roadblocks to learn automation testing, where we're going to cover multiple aspects about what are the different things which you may feel as a roadblock to learn automation testing. So my name is Saurabh. I'm in this industry for the last 12 plus years, and right from the day when I'm working in a QA automation industry, I'm very passionate in it and I love my job. I was fortunate to work with different type of companies, like product companies like Oracle, Cisco, Workday, mostly enterprise companies. And also I worked with service companies like Cognizant, Zensar Technologies. And because I have a mix of exposure between product and service companies, I have realized the way automation testing is being treated or used or leveraged in both of these different atmosphere is different. So I'm going to also talk about that towards the end part of our session. At present, I am SDET, software developer engineer in test at Apple. I work from Cupertino in California. And yeah, that's all about my introduction. So today we're going to talk about roadblocks. So I have divided the entire roadblocks into two parts. One is a non-technical aspects, what all things may come in between your learning, and another is a technical aspect. Of course, automation means we have to learn some technical things, right? Like programming language, different tools, or frameworks or design patterns, and all those things I'm gonna talk about it later. But first, let's focus on what are the non-technical aspects, like what are the main roadblocks. Most of the time, I have heard all these things from my own students who try to learn automation from me, and that's the reason I have curated all this content for you guys. So once we talk about roadblocks, I want you guys to relate or try to think that is this the point applicable to me, or am I also in the same boat? So when I talk about roadblocks, then try to understand whether any of these points are making sense to you, and if yes, then you have to take down some notes, because after we finish about roadblocks, we're going to talk about the building blocks, which means how to overcome those roadblocks. How we're going to create our own study plan, or what is going to be our short term or long term goals for learning automation. So I'm going to help you guys to identify your own pattern, and from that you can pick a specific area wherever you are in your automation learning journey. Some of you may be getting started, some of you are already working in that role and trying to get into maybe an advanced role, or maybe someone who is in other role altogether in IT industry and trying to switch to NSDED or automation. So we'll cover all of that. So let's talk about roadblocks now. And like I said, first let's discuss about what are the non-technical roadblocks most of the people encounter, right? So the first thing I try to understand is the curiosity for automation. That's very important. I know people try to learn automation because they think it's going to help them to get that next good job or that good high paycheck, which is fine. But I feel sometimes the curiosity is not up to the mark, which doesn't help them to learn in a right way, or it doesn't help them to run from scratch or from basic or to the level of expertise where they can utilize in their projects. So the first aspect is curiosity about automation, and I'm going to talk about that when we talk about building blocks, that how to overcome that. But yeah, that's the first point. Another thing is attitude of getting started. That's a major roadblock, because I feel sometimes people get afraid that, hey, I think automation may need a lot of technical expertise. I need to have programming understanding, a lot of different tools. I'll have to write a bunch of code. Yes, you will have to write, but there is nothing to get afraid about. I have seen and I have trained a lot of such folks who came from a non-technical background. They didn't know anything about coding, and today they are delivering good value and good impact in the automation projects. So I think the attitude of getting started, or that fear that I may not able to succeed in this industry, I'm not able to learn, is something I feel as a major roadblock. So you have to get over that, and you have to plan your automation learning in a right way. So like I said, short term and a long term goals, we'll talk about that, how to create automation learning in an agile way. So that's another thing. uh, there is one more thing, manual testing concepts, uh, which are not clear yet. So there are some folks who are straight out of a college and they say, hey, I don't want to learn manual testing, and I'm going to straight away start automation, which I feel is not a right way. The reason, because if you don't know about manual testing concepts, then you may not be very successful in automation. Because when you automate something, you of course definitely need to know how to test that particular process or that particular application manually, because then only you will able to automate it. And the next maturity of automation is how do we consolidate multiple test cases, or how to consolidate different manual testing strategies into one optimized automation flow. So lack of manual testing concepts, that's a third roadblock which I feel. And if you feel that you are good in manual testing, then you are the right candidate to get started for learning automation. Then this is very important point, identifying the automation opportunities. I mean to say, within a project. This is a regular complaint I hear from my students, saying like, hey Saurabh, I'm in my project for so many years, and even though I want to do automation, I want to learn and I want to deliver, I don't have any automation projects. And where do I practice? Because unless I practice, I may not able to learn, I may not able to fail. And how do I mature in automation if I don't have actual project to work? I understand your point, but never assume that automation is going to come ready made and someone is going to serve you on the plate. And like I said, the automation in a service industry and the product companies are different. In a service companies, it's my experience, I may be wrong, but I feel automation is more or less treated as an add-on to their existing projects, the existing QA projects, just to impress the clients, or try to give some automation exposure, so that uh, you can showcase the ROI, that hey, we have been doing this manually for a long time and now we have automated this. Whereas in product companies, automation is very vital and it's a bread and butter. No code can get committed without running your automation test inventory. So every developer, whatever the changes they do, it has to go through the automated pipelines, which means automation is must for them. Whereas in service companies, you may not have this kind of infrastructure or processes in place. So from whatever industry you're coming from, don't wait for the automation opportunities or project to be presented to you ready-made. It may not never happen. But then how do I start automation projects? I'm going to talk about that in a building blocks, but this is a major roadblock. Most of the people, they try to take a step back thinking I don't have a project, or I may not able to work or practice because there is nothing. I simply can't listen some video and try to do it on my laptop. I'm going to teach you how you can get uh, like overcome that particular roadblock in my further points. But yeah, that's also one of the important thing. There is another point, which is dedication. This may sound very, very obvious to you guys, but believe me, this is very, very important. Learning any new thing needs dedication, right? And it needs discipline. And if you don't learn things consistently, then doesn't matter how good student or how good engineer you are, how logical you may sound. If you don't have the discipline of learning something on a regular basis, you will never reach to the goal of finishing that course or finishing that roadmap or study plan which you curated for yourself, right? So dedication is very, very important. You need to write that, hey, I have to do some automation 2 hours a week. Put that in front of you wherever you work. Let's talk about that in a building blocks, how to overcome that roadblock. But yes, dedication is also one of the very important aspects. And some more few points, like start with any topic. You not necessarily wait for automation projects to to be presented to you, and then you try to research and explore how do I automate it, and then only you will start learning. Not necessarily. Don't wait that shall I learn Java first, or Python, Selenium, or Catalan? Does GitHub make sense, or SVN make sense for me? I should learn for Jenkins or TeamCity or Bitbucket. So what I'm trying to say is, doesn't matter. You have to follow a right path, but you have to start with something. It's very important to start on any automation topic, but you have to learn that from basics. You have to learn that from scratch. I just gonna present some Udemy course completion statistics to you guys. I just Googled it and I found that altogether, whatever Udemy sells their courses, and this is not the official numbers, or whatever I have seen in Google, that's what I'm sharing. Only 10% is the overall completion rate. So from this you can imagine that how many people buy different courses, or they try to get themselves enrolled into something, but they never finish. They just listen 10% of it, 20% of it, and then they leave it. 10% completion rate is very, very less. I feel that most of the people just give it up, on the journey. And then one more roadblock, very important, is illogical jumps to learn automation. What I mean to say, illogical jumps, which means today you started on one topic, let's say programming concepts, right? You chose Java and you started learning data types and what are the different object-oriented concepts involved in it, arrays, loops, switch statement, collection framework, and whatever. And then you feel, okay, I think I'm done with this, and let's jump on Jenkins. And then you started learning, okay, what is CI/CD framework? How the pipeline works, single, multi, hybrid, how to write Ansible scripts, and then you get bored with that topic, and then you jump on some other, let's say, reporting aspects or rest assured. So illogical jumps here and there can also cause a lot of pause, or I would say you may not able to take a right steps to complete your automation learning. So you have to create a plan in a way that whatever technology you are learning which is related to automation makes sense. It has to be logical, it has to be in an incremental way. If you don't even know programming concepts, if you haven't even invested to learn the object oriented things, it doesn't make sense to even start learning design patterns, right? Because if you're trying to understand the framework, if you're trying to understand different design patterns like page object model or singleton pattern or factory pattern, you will never relate that in a right way because you haven't invested in learning the object oriented basics, fundamentals, right? So what tool to learn in an incremental way, that also matters. We'll talk about that in our next section, which is building blocks. So that's also one of the roadblock, not defining or not creating your learning plan in a right way or in a right direction. Because whenever you Google something or whenever you try to listen some random YouTube video, most of the folks will talk about, hey, you need to learn programming concepts, you need to learn about the where you store your code, let's say, uh, CI servers, and where do you run your code, how do you use a different reporting frameworks, how do you use a different design patterns. But they'll hardly talk about what is the right approach to learn them in a right order, right? If you don't know the difference between the logging and reporting, then doesn't make sense to even invest to learn the reporting framework. How do I include that feature or technology in my automation framework? So we're going to talk about the logical way for an incremental learning. And then very important point is automation attitude. So why I'm saying automation attitude is because you need to be always observing what's happening in your project. Like I said, automation opportunities may not appear or may not be presented to you right away. You need to identify those opportunities. You need to say that, hey, I think we are doing this manually for a long time. How about I give a try and try to automate this? I may success, I may not, but let me try. What do you feel about it? Have an open discussion with your manager, or even if you're with the colleagues, and then try automating that part. It may not be automation testing. It may be writing a simple macro in an Excel to do something. That's also considered as an automation learning, even though you're not automating manual test cases, but you are doing something which can save time, right? This leads to automation attitude. This leads to of identifying the productivity tools, and the kind of attitude or kind of observation you bring into a project for consolidating things or automating things, you start learning a lot of new things which you haven't even planned, because you try to explore, and that suddenly creates an excitement to you that, oh, I think if I automate this simple thing, I may get a good visibility, I may get a good appreciation from a manager, and I'll able to save a lot of time for my team. So how about let's try to automate. You may not know how to do that small automation in an Excel sheet using a macro, but you will invest a time, you will do research, you will do trial and error, you will fail, you may not succeed, but that journey, that automation attitude, that is important, and that is what the major roadblock in a lot of folks. They don't have that. They just feel, okay, I learn Java, I learn Selenium, and that's it, I'm ready for interviews. It's okay, but if you try all these small things which I'm sharing today, it's really going to help you to get into that automation maturity journey. Because believe me, no engineer starts with full expertise in automation. Not even me. When I started my career, I hardly knew anything. Today also, I'm a learner. I will never call myself as an expert or I know everything, because every project comes with a different challenges, and every automation will teach you something. So be a learner. Try to discuss things with your colleagues, your managers, your friends, and bring that surrounding to you, that automation attitude around you. Having right influence actually can change your life, and it can take you to a automation journey. So that's also one of the roadblock. And then I'll conclude the roadblock section right now, which is afraid for coding or any technical exposure. And I have seen a lot of brilliant QAs. I mean to say manual QAs. I have worked with them, and I have seen so much of awesome logical understanding, and they do a lot of non-technical things, but a lot of logical things within a business or with an application, which I really appreciate. And I feel that if this guy learn automation even 10%, he can take his job to another level. So that afraid, that fear of getting exposed to a coding or technical things involved in an automation sometimes keep you blocked, or sometimes keep you not moving in the automation learning journey. So so these are the broad roadblocks. These are non-technical, right? And let's jump on a technical roadblocks. Now, what are the technical roadblocks? The technical roadblocks we'll talk about while talking about the building blocks, because you can relate with them now. Let's assume that I am an engineer. I have some manual testing experience in an industry. I've spent a couple of years, and now I'm interested to learn automation. Some people may learn forcefully, means need in their project, or some people may learn with curiosity and interest because it's fun. It's actually fun if you try to learn automation and use it in your real job. It's actually fun. You will feel very 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 good when your automation projects are actually getting successfully delivered. You actually will feel very good. So there are different type of people who try to learn automation, but in that journey we'll talk about what are the building blocks you are necessarily need to get into the right path. So the first thing is understanding your own learning pattern. Very important. The reason I'm talking about this is, as you know, today I'm hosting this event and you are learning for free. Similarly, you will see a lot of trainers out there who are sharing their knowledge for free on YouTube, on Udemy, and a lot of other learning platforms. And today we are in a situation that there's an ocean of information around us, and we don't know what to pick. So understanding your own learning pattern is very important. And by saying that, what I mean is, if you are learning something, you need to ask yourself, hey, can I learn on my own? Am I a self-driven person? I am a disciplined, I am dedicated. And if I can learn on my own, I would say you are a best person to learn everything for free in this market. Because honestly, everything is available for free in this industry. You just need to be of self-discipline. But if you're not able to learn on your own, if you're not able to invest that self-driven attitude to learn on a right track, and if you're delaying your learning for 6 months or for a year just because you feel that, hey, I think I can learn on YouTube, I can learn on Udemy, understand in this industry time is money. The more you delay your learning, you are losing the compounding effect on your career, right? So it's better to understand your own learning pattern. And this is not just for automation. I have realized this is applicable for any technical learning or in your career. It's okay if you can learn on your own, and but with what pace you can learn on your own, how much impact, how much of value you can bring to your career by learning on your own needs to be calculated. The reason, because if you're taking 1 year to learn automation, then you are very late in an industry, right? You wasted that 12 months just because you thought I can learn on my own and I can do practice on my own. Rather than that, I would say understand what can get me on board quickly. Shall I go and talk to some trainer, go to some classroom, ask a friend or relative or my manager to teach me something, and I can get it in 2 months? The reason, because all this learning gives you more maturity and it adds a compounding effect in automation. So that's very important to understand that how to learn, from where to learn, and that is different with every individual. So that's one of the aspect in a building block. And then stop blindly following anyone anywhere. What I mean to say is, if you are trying to understand any one topic, if you just search and you just try to read at least couple of different opinions around it, and it's applicable to me as well. I'm talking today whatever I think is the right opinion based on my experience, but try to do more research around it. Sometimes the one person may talk completely different thing about automation than the other trainer, and try to do little bit of investment to understand, is he's a right person to teach me on that topic. Check their credentials, check their success stories, check their previous students. So why I'm telling you all these things is because, like I said, time is money. If you waste with a wrong trainer or wrong resources, your journey will rewind, and you may not able to get to that speed. So it's very important that understand what trainers out there makes sense to me and to whom I can relate well, whose teaching is actually beneficial for me. Of course, everyone has a different teaching style, right? So you need to invest some time to understand your learning pattern. Then next step is try to find what are the trainers available out there on different platforms: classroom, in person versus live, online, pre-recorded versus one-to-one. Invest some time and then pick the right trainer or right resource from where you can learn. And then create a learning plan. Create a learning plan for yourself, which I'm going to help you right now to understand the short term and a long term plan for automation learning. That's very important. The reason, because when you create that short term and a long term plan for yourself, you'll able to understand and evaluate, am I on the right path to learn automation, right? Because every automation project matures with time, and same thing is applicable to an individual learning as well. No one can start their automation journey with knowing everything. You may know a couple of technologies, you will get started in a project, but as more challenges comes, more different problem statement comes to solve, you will evolve, right? So it's very important to get started, and without worrying that, hey, I don't know this, that, it's fine. Whatever you know, get started with it, but have an attitude of learning and implementing and get that issue solved, or get that problem statement whichever is in front of you for automation to be solved, right? It's never going to be perfect, believe me, but it's very important to get start with it. So implement an agile methodology in your learning aspect as well. Like, break down the complete problem statement of automation and then start with small things. Now let's talk about the learning goals. What are the short-term and long-term learning goals you should have if you are getting started for automation? Now let's start about automation fundamentals. So what is automation fundamentals? So I have seen a lot of trainings where they directly start teaching you Selenium. It is okay, but then without even focusing on what is object-oriented programming, they say, hey, just write WebDriver equal to COM driver, And I have asked in one of my interview to one of the person that, hey, can you explain me why do we write this? Because ideally in a Java, whenever you create object of a class, you write class name, object name equal to new, and then class name, right? But here, if you learn, if you can relate what I'm talking about, when you're learning a Selenium WebDriver with the Java as a language, a lot of people just simply by heart that, WebDriver driver equal to new Chrome driver. And then they use that driver and then all the methods inside it to find element and perform action on those elements. But they don't understand what is that, because you haven't invested to understand what is abstract class, what is interface, what the object-oriented programming is all about. And that is the first fundamental step in your automation journey. And that's why I say, try to understand the automation fundamentals. And in that automation fundamental, the first thing comes is HTML. I know it may sound a little weird to you, but yes, HTML is very important, guys, for automation engineers. If you don't understand HTML, it's very difficult for you to write good XPaths or good CSS to detect the element and perform action on them. So create your own HTML page. You can create in 10 minutes. Believe me, I have a video on my YouTube channel. If you go, just type HTML for Selenium testers or HTML for Java automation testers. I have, I think, 10 minutes of video. And once you listen that, I can assure you, you will able to create your own web page in 10 minutes. And the reason I'm saying that is because when you create your own small web page, and then when you try to automate on that web page, then it gives a very different feeling, you know. And this is how I train my folks who come to learn automation from me. So one of the aspect in automation fundamental is to understand HTML. Then the another thing is how the web works, which means when you type something on your browser, google.com, and when you hit enter, what happens internally, you know. If you're connected to internet, then what happens? The browser sends request to whom? Where do you get a response? How do I see that beautiful pages, which are nothing but HTML, along with a lot of other technologies like CSS, JavaScript, and a lot of bunch of different things, right? So that fundamental is also very important for you to learn. The reason because when you're automating the web pages and when you know the internals of a web pages, how the web pages work, or how this HTML is being presented to you, what's its element structure, we call it as DOM structure, document object model, right? Then it's very easy, or it's very relatable and enjoyable to automate that page, right? So in the building blocks, one of the thing which I teach, or I will request you guys to focus, is understanding how the web works and how the HTML page is being designed. Go to any web page, just type google.com and right click on your Chrome browser and just see view source. You know, when you do that, you will see a lot of HTML being presented to you, starting with the top HTML element, and then try to understand how that HTML is being designed. Try to write your own small HTML file. You can write it in a notepad. It just includes a couple of elements, you know. Elements mean HTML elements. And then you will feel, then you will understand that, oh, okay, when I'm automating such web pages, when I talk about detecting element on a web pages, which means I am talking about writing some query language like SQL for HTML to detect that element on that complete big web page, right? Because unless you detect element, or unless you detect that one particular web object, it can be an input button, it can be a drop down, it can be text. How do I perform action on it, right? Because in automation, you do that repetitively. Detect element, perform action on it. Detect element, perform action on it. You do that repetitively in a more optimized way, where we talk about design patterns and all. But yes, this is the fundamental. You detect element and you perform action on it. That's what you do in most of the UI automation. Similarly, try to learn API fundamentals. What is API? Without browser, if I want to do something, like let's say Spotify, you listen music on it, right? You just click a button and then you get streaming. You start listening something. Try to learn some API fundamentals, how that technology works, right? And then we'll talk about how do you automate those APIs. Database fundamentals. It can be SQL, it can be anything, right? Uh, any one, consider any one database, let's say SQL, right? And then try to learn, okay, how do we store a data? How do we query a data? You don't need to be expert in it, but basic fundamentals are important because that will help to increase your curiosity when you're automating it. So have that fundamentals in your learning plan when you're learning automation. And then you start with picking up the most famous or popular tool out there, which is, let's say, Selenium, to automate UI. And I would recommend to start with the UI automation. The reason because it's visible to you, you can relate, you can see your script getting playback, you can see the browser is getting launched, and you can see that actions are getting performed. So it's very intuitive, and it keeps you on track and keeps you motivated to learn more. So start with a UI automation tool. I would recommend Selenium because it's open source and a lot of resources available out there to learn that. But if not, you can select any other as well. Cypress is there, Catalan is there, but Selenium would be the right choice if you're getting started with the UI automation. And then try to learn the basics of Selenium. And before learning basics of Selenium, like I said, you need to learn basics of any programming language. It could be Java, it could be Python, it could be C#, right? And I have a beautiful course on my YouTube, totally free for you guys, Java for Automation Testers. It has some 20, 30 videos, small videos created in an agile way to keep you curated automation related learning. Even if you learn that much, you are good to go. Now let's talk about what topics I need in Java, uh, or any programming language before I start learning the automation tool like Selenium, right? You don't need to be expert in programming language before you start automation. You don't need to learn like a developer, like a bunch of things. Just basics. You can get started with the basics, like for example different data types, what's array, what's how the if else works, conditional statements like control flows, right? Loops, different type of loops, for loop, while loop, switch statement, how the switch statement works, collection framework. uh, Very important, maybe a maturity topic, but yes, important to understand how the hash map works, hash table, map interface. If you try to invest some time, believe me, 1 month is sufficient for you to get on track to learn these basics, right? Array list, linked list, exception handling. I have hosted a webinar on exception handling. You go and check that. It's 45 minutes. That's sufficient for you to understand how the exception handling works. Try catch. Finally, what's the difference between throw keyword and throws keyword in Java, right? So, and then file handling. How do you handle different type of data files? Like for example, in automation, you'll regularly deal with a different type of extensions. For example, CSV, JSON, YAML, XML. You need to answer what should be the right data file for me to use for a project, depending on how the data is being nested within that, or so you just start with how to handle a file. How do I read a file, how do I write in a file handling in Java. You can run that. I think that's it. This many topics, if you learn in Java, you are good to start with your automation tool. The next logical step in it, once you are done with the programming concepts, when you are done with some basics of programming concepts, then you pick any uh, UI automation tool. And like I suggested, it should be, or it can be, a Selenium or Catalan or Cypress. But yeah, good to start with Selenium, right? So first is understanding how UI works, like how the internet works altogether, right? When you do a query, how the request goes to your DNS, to your IP providers, or the web servers, how the request comes back, how it displays a web page to you. Learn that, watch bunch of videos, query yourself, then learn about how the HTML pages are being constructed. Try to create your own HTML page. And then next thing is learn programming concepts, basic things in Java or Python. If you're getting started, Python would be a best choice because it's easy syntactically. So yeah, Java or Python. I see a lot of automation projects in these two languages. I have worked 12 years in this industry. I started my career with Java, but right now I'm working on Python, a lot of Python automation projects. So yeah, both of these languages are highly used. And then meanwhile, once you start working on it, of course, you will be learning some other things as well down the line, like JavaScript and SQL and so on. But at least get started with one of the object-oriented programming. And then once you are pretty comfortable with how Selenium works, uh, in Selenium, there are a lot of things to cover. And I would say, don't worry about it. Just get started, just launch a browser, detect something, perform action, and do that repetitively on as many pages you can. The reason, because when you understand the crux of it, that you do repetitively object detection, perform action, object detection, perform action, then you start exploring more, that if I do the similar thing on thousands of pages. So let's assume you have created a small script where you are launching a browser, doing something and clicking on it, putting some inputs, and you are doing repetitively, and you are being asked to do that for thousands of web pages, right? That's where you will realize that I think there is some problem. I can automate this, but if when I'm automating this on a scale, if I'm doing this for thousands of pages, then you yourself will understand some challenges to maintain that, or to handle that, or to scale that. And that's where you come into understanding the design patterns. So a lot of folks directly try to learn design patterns without even understanding what problem statement their design patterns are solving, right? So before that, give yourself a time, try to automate multiple pages. You can choose any websites available and which are stable. Don't pick a shopping websites will have sales flashing on, which dynamically changes. Take any static website which you can automate and give a practice, and try to automate a lot of pages, different Java files, different Python files, and do it as simple as you can. Don't worry about a lot of abstraction, or don't worry about a lot of interfaces and any of such things. The reason I'm telling you is because it's important to get started, right? Because when you start and then you do it in a plain vanilla way, like a simple thing, then you understand some problem statements and then you find a solution for it and you say like, hey, I think there is a tool who can solve this problem, right? So for example, if you and your teammates are creating automation and you are storing that code on your own laptop, and you need to consolidate your code, you are sending them over Slack or an email, and that's not the right way. And that's where you understand, oh, there is a challenge. Is there any tool in the market who can help me handle all this automatically? And then the answer comes, yes, there is, which is GitHub, right? We call it as version control system, VCS. So there are a bunch of VCS systems out there, like GitHub is there, Bitbucket is there, SVN is there, and a lot of other. So first you understand a problem statement, what it's solving, and then you try to understand which technology to choose or learn. That will be a right long-term plan for your automation learning. Before understanding what problem statement the technology is solving, you directly try to learn because it's included in my Udemy course or on YouTube, or automation framework understanding needs me to talk about this in an interview, will not take you far. Try to learn, okay, what problem statement that technology is solving, and then try to implement that in your project and try to feel with and without that technology, right? So without GitHub, how does it feels? With GitHub, how does it feel? That will help you to increase your automation maturity, right? The next thing, I think we're already up at time. I think I can talk a lot on this. Uh, there is one more webinar I'm planning next month, which is going to be on different cloud services for automation testing. And this is going to be for someone who is already in automation testing or already in an SDET, and they're trying to leverage different services out there from AWS, like compute service, storage service, Lambda function, serverless, database services, how to leverage that for your better automation or to matured automation. So that's going to be a separate webinar. So stay tuned and subscribe me. You can get the invitation if you are connected me over the LinkedIn. So let's wrap up quickly. And what are the roadblocks? We already discussed it, technical and non-technical. And then what are the building blocks? So like I said, for building blocks, you need to first understand how the UI works, then pick up an HTML, learn HTML. My YouTube video can help you to get started with it. Create your own HTML pages. Try to pick any automation tool like Selenium. Try to learn the automation tool either on your own or enroll in a training, or like I said, understand your own learning pattern, what makes more sense for you to get out of it, right? Because learning on your own, if it's taking 6 or 1 months or 1 year, then you're wasting a time. You're losing that compounding effect on your career. So understand your own learning pattern, get into the right resources, connect with right people, learn the Selenium for UI, automate on your own web pages first, then you go for any other web pages out there. Try to do that repetitively for multiple web pages, so that if you have thousands of scripts, then you understand the problem statement, then you start understanding the other aspects which solves that problem statement, like design patterns and so on, right? And then if you feel little bit comfortable around it, switch it to API automation, right? Go to API automation, learn about API automation, how the different tools are available, like Rest Assured is there, Postman is there, right? But that should be a next journey in your learning path. Start with the basics of web automation. And then let's talk about framework components. I know automation framework is a very buzzword in an interviews as well. When I ask what is automation framework, I get a lot of different answers. Sometimes people talk in depth about any one topic. Sometimes people talk about multiple aspects without in a right order. So in a short, what is framework? See, framework is a discipline. Framework is a guideline, which is when followed by everyone in a team gives you a beneficial results. So framework is not just for automation. Framework can be for any other projects, for any other industry. So automation framework means there are a bunch of things which you do in your automation projects which can yield a better result, right? For example, where do you store a code? Where do you run a code? How do you collect the metrics? How do you report your execution trends? How do you get the analysis from your execution when you run in a single thread versus multiple threads, and bunch of other framework components. So learning first what is framework is very important, and then there are a bunch of different framework components. I also talk about framework maturity models in some of my previous jobs I have identified, because like I said, every automation project starts with a level 0. And you have to accept that automation matures with time. The early you start in a project, you are on a right track to get a lot of returns over the period of time. Sometimes the managers or your team members and everyone may not able to understand this. You need to educate, you need to talk with them that automation matures with time. It's very important we start as early as possible. And then there are a bunch of things in an automation framework, like where do you take screenshot? Do you take a screenshot? Where do you store it? How do you log it? How do you report it? Metrics collection, right? Notification like email, Slack notification. Do we need health check scripts? Do we need to implement any design pattern because we have thousands of scripts now, right? Do we need browserless execution for our UI automation, right? Do we integrate with any CI/CD server, right? Is there any automation which automate automation, like auto detecting the failures and try to rerun those scripts, right? Nightly run scripts. A lot of bunch of things comes into automation maturity. So these all you don't need to worry. But what I'm trying to say here is start early, start with small, and try to iterate and try to be on track on your learning, So that's what I'll end and conclude my session today. I took 10 minutes more, but I'm very excited to connect you guys offline as well. Please join me on my LinkedIn, or just email me on contact@ministryofautomation.com. You can visit to my website as well, ministryofautomation.com, and there you can find some good resources, or go to my YouTube channel. I create a bunch of useful videos for people who are trying to learn automation, and I also take automation transformational classes where I teach people automation right from the scratch, where I give them a blueprint about how do you identify your own learning pattern and then the right resources and create their short-term and long-term learning plans. So that's it from my end, and I'm happy that you guys connected and listened to me on my first ever LinkedIn audio event. I'm very thankful to you, all of you.